Welcome to Let's Run Facebook Ads, the Extra Cast. Myself, James, and today we're joined by Georgie, who's the co-founder and CEO.
Founder.
No, it's founder, isn't it? It's not co-founder. I did this to someone else the other week. I was like, oh, it's fine. Founder, there's no one else, there's just you who's founded it, of Peppered. See, this is how we start.
Yeah.
Who essentially help health and wellness brands retain, attract more customers. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How are you getting on?
Yeah, good. Yeah, looking forward to diving into this.
Well, I'd love to know where it all started, your background, how Pep started, and how you got to this point today.
Oh, good question. Okay, I'll keep it brief. So my background has always been in the sort of email lifecycle world. Before starting the business, I worked in-house for a sort of US tech startup based in London. And my role sort of expanded as the business grew, and I took on that kind of the email lifecycle piece. And actually at uni, I studied sort of consumer behaviour, which I really loved, and sort of as part of my marketing degree. And that's always been an interest of mine in terms of thinking about how people work, how they tick, the psychology behind getting people to do what you might want them to do, and then that sort of fed really well into the email world, and so and I've always wanted to sort of run my own business and do my own thing, and I got to a point when I was at my previous employer where I just thought, right, I'm gonna jump ship. I'm gonna do some freelance consulting whilst I figure out what business it is that I want to start. And it sort of just so happened that it kind of scaled up from there, really. So it was slightly unintentional to end up where I have ended up, but actually I'm really enjoying it. It's a great place to be. We've got great clients that we're working with, and I really enjoy the kind of that sort of consumer behavior, nurturing side of things when it comes to sort of the email, SMS, and customer life cycles.
So what is for the basic people out there, what is life cycle marketing?
It's a great question. So in a nutshell, lifecycle marketing is about mapping out a customer journey. So all the different touch points that a customer might go through with a particular business. So, if we're talking about the e-commerce world, it might be, the interactions that someone might have with you when they first reach the site, how can you sort of encourage them to make their first purchase, thinking about kind of continuing to nurture and engage them as they use your product, as hopefully they come back and buy a second, whatever it is, winning them back if they happen to lapse, getting them to refer friends, getting to join loyalty programs. It's about that sort of engagement and sending the right communication to the right people at the right time, depending on where they are in that customer journey with you.
Well, it's interesting because I a lot of the e-commerce brands that will listen to this, who are small business owners, typically using things like Shopify, and so much emphasis is put on the initial acquisition of that client. We've got great video, we've got to create amazing content, we've got to do some amazing offers. And they've acquired that customer, that customer has gone, I'm happy to use you, whether for a product or service. And then it sort of just drops off.
Yeah.
They sort of forget that you've spent all that money and resource trying to acquire that customer, and then they go into their monthly newsletter, which for me personally, especially when you're a product-led brand. Do you see that from your clients and prospects? They've that front end is so important, but then they sort of dwindle off when they actually acquire that customer.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting you said it, because I think that's often the bit that's kind of, that's the fun bit, that's the sexy bit, isn't it? Getting people in the first place. But actually, everyone knows it's much easier to retain an existing customer than acquire a new one. And so that's where we come in terms of really building those relationships with those customers, driving that trust, keeping them engaged over the long run. And I think a lot of the pitfalls that maybe some e-commerce brands fall into is that it's is thinking about sort of selling the whole time and pushing products or services, whatever it is they're offering. Whereas actually you always need to take a step back and think about the bigger picture and think about adding value to their lives in sort of complementary ways. Could you, if you're a lifestyle brand, there must be, you know, likely to be sort of blogs and videos and other things that you can sort of share with your customers that isn't selling to them all the time, but keeps you top of mind and builds that trust as a sort of, you know, some other place that they come back to, and also the types of emails that they want to open. You mentioned your newsletters, that no one likes just another newsletter, but I'm sure you might have one or two, I'll be willing to bet I do, that you actually do look forward to opening, and it's those ones that are probably driving much more content led types of sort of engagement, and are adding lots of value rather than selling all the time.
Yeah, because the newsletter one, I use that as an example, but a lot of the ones I get they're never exciting. They're not. They're just, all they do is talk about that business, what they've done that month or week. And me,
no one really cares.
No one cares. And again, because we're in this world, and I did a talk yesterday and I said to the crowd, no one cares about the videos about the team. I don't need to spend money on them. The only people that care are the people that are in that video. Your prospects don't actually matter too much, unless it's a vlog type style video. But sitting down and listening to Dave in accounts or Jess of head of sales, what they like to do outside of work isn't going to convert business for you. It's just not the way. But from an email marketing perspective, do you? And I'm intrigued to get your what you guys do, your side, which is, how do you segment your list before you email? So someone, if we look at e-commerce brands, obviously a lot of them will have just a plethora of different products. Now, they all have different mosaic groups that buy those products or services. Do you recommend to your customers to actually segment those into separate pots, and then actually do emails based on their interactions with that brand? Or do you just do they've come into the brand, they need a product of some description?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, typically what we'd recommend is that you have a series or a number of different email series which are sort of sitting in the background, and they're running on an automated basis, and they're triggered to certain people based on their behavior. So for example, when someone maybe signs up for a discount on a pop-up on the website, and they sign up for like a 10% discount, whatever it might be, they haven't made a purchase yet, but they're clearly engaged in what you might have to offer. You can then put them through a welcome series, which is sort of welcoming them into the brand, maybe peppering in a bit about what you've got to offer, adding a bit of social proof, testimonials, that kind of thing. And then you might move them into a first purchase series once they've made their first purchase. So you'd have a number of these different, abandoned cart, all that sort of thing. You have a number of those different automated series, which are kind of your foundation and are running hopefully in the background and automatically being triggered to the right people. And then you can then layer on top of that. So you can then have your kind of your ad hoc campaigns, whether it's kind of seasonal stuff or newsletters. That's become the dirty word now. We'll come on to newsletters. And that you can layer those on top, and you can then even get kind of another layer of sophisticated where you're thinking about the segmentation side even more, and thinking about, okay, well, we know this bucket of people bought X product 6 months ago. It's a skincare product, so we know it's going to run out. Can we start then targeting them with replenishment series, and as you say, kind of being a bit more clever in terms of how you're actually targeting those people? So I guess in answer to the question, I would suggest having a kind of foundational set of email series and journeys that are going to walk people through that, they're welcoming them to the brand and triggering sort of that initial sort of series. And then on top of that, you can start getting a bit more sophisticated and creating sort of triggers based on behavior, based on purchasing history, based on, you might have a happy birthday trigger, for example, or triggered email. You can then get a little bit more granular in terms of those segments. But 100% recommend segmenting your audience. So sort of the days of one size fits all are very much over, sadly, when it comes to lifecycle marketing.
Well, I'm really glad you said about that sort of foundation piece, because a lot of businesses that still don't use email marketing, and typically smaller e-commerce brands don't, which still, like I said, baffles me, because they've spent all that time, whether it's a social post, whether it's actually some video content, and then someone's come into their brand, and the foundation, once it's done, it's done. Yes, don't get me wrong, if there's product changes or there's legislation changes, obviously there's got to be some tweaks there, but really, it sort of just sits running in the background and you don't have to touch it. Yes, there's that initial investment of time and money, if you outsource to a copywriter or someone like yourselves, but once it's done, it's done and dusted. But some of the brands that I actually interact with and I look at the emails and go, wow, that's incredible, is I do a lot of trail running. So there's a new shoe called On Runnings.
Oh yeah.
Their emails are brilliant. They're so tailored to what I'm after in the time. I don't know if they look outside of the weather where I am. They're really, really good. Really good. And they're probably out of all my emails, and I receive a ton of them. They're probably the ones I interact with most because
it's relevant.
They're relevant. They're relevant. And yeah, it's so frustrating that, you know, these brands don't look at email marketing as a sort of pillar of their business, because it's still one of the most easy way to retain businesses, which is all I wanted to go into sort of next, actually, which is the retention side. You know, how do you retain customers?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of feeds into what we were just talking about in terms of having those kind of always on type series and campaigns that you've got running in the background. It's about kind of, you know, an element of sort of the surprise and delight side of things. So if you capture people's birthdays, for example, you know, could you send them a happy birthday reminder and that kind of thing? Could you, if you've got a loyalty program, that's another great way of retaining customers over the long run and getting them to come back and continue to purchase and incentivizing that. Yeah, it's also about adding high value content along the way. So thinking about what's relevant, how can you, as you just suggested with On Running, it sounds like they send really personalized and relevant comms to you. The kind of, it can get quite complex, but in its, you know, in its basic form, it's just about thinking, you know, being quite granular and sending those relevant personalized comms and adding value along the way, whether it's, you know, blog, video, any other type of content that's not directly selling, but is providing them with maybe entertainment or something emotive, something that's going to help build that connection between the brand and that customer. So it's about that sort of always on consistent approach of adding value and positioning yourself as, you know, or the brand as that, in that position of authority and that trusted source of advice.
What about offers and discounts and alike? Do they, what's your opinion on those? Because from a retention perspective, and I say this to a lot of clients, especially with e-commerce brands we deal with, again, if you spend all that money acquiring that customer, you don't need to, you know, they're already in your ecosystem. If all it's going to cost you is an email, which we know is really, really cheap, you can afford to give offers away. But then some brands we deal with say, oh, I don't want to devalue my brand. And I always say to them, no, but you look at it commercially. If you've got to give a 5% discount, which you just spent on marketing spend anyway, and that email is costing you 2p, I know what I would do personally. And look at someone like the White Company. The White Company have built a brand on discounts. Yeah, they're seen as a nice brand. You know, they're not on discount. You know, they're not like a pound stretcher, are they? By any stretch of imagination, all they've done for the last 10 years is discount. It's all they've done. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, it's I think it can be a very slippery slope once you start going down that discount route. But I think you're right, when it's done strategically, and I guess what I mean by that is that, you know, if you've got, for example, you've got a bucket of your customers who you've seen that haven't bought from you in 6 months or whatever it might be, you might start to think about how you can re-engage those customers. And you don't necessarily have to go in with the discount straight away. You could add a kind of, you know, a reminder of new products or new updates, whatever it might be, and try them with that type of messaging first to see of that bucket how many of those people convert. You could then at a later date or a couple of days later send the discount offer type email, but you don't have to go in there kind of straight away. I recommend using it more strategically than that, and think about those people and how they're sort of interacting with you, and maybe going down the sort of non-discount route first. Having said that, you know, offers, incentives are great ways to kind of hook people back in, particularly when you use a bit of urgency around them. So time sensitive offers, things that are expiring in 24, 48 hours, that's another great way to hook people back in. And the other thing to consider is, it doesn't have to be money off. It could be value add, it could be free shipping, it could be an extra something in their order that you're throwing in for free. It doesn't, discount or incentives don't have to be monetary value. It could be something else that you're sort of adding rather than taking money off. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I've seen a few brands that have gone, once you start going down that slippery slope of lots of discounts, it's very hard to pull back from it. So I think it needs to be, you need to definitely consider it and use it sort of strategically, so that when you are offering that incentive or that discount, it has much more impact.
It is a hard one. Like I said, a lot of the smaller brands we deal with, typical e-commerce, and again, a lot of them listen to this, is that we have this debate constantly: is, should you put a discount on? Should you not? But it's really hard, because us looking at it commercially, it makes total sense. We whether that's email marketing, or it's Facebook ads, Instagram ads, whatever that may be, or even TikTok now. We're looking at it commercially and go, well, it's going to make sense to do that. But on the other side of the spectrum, you've got someone who is a business owner. They've put their blood, sweat, and tears into this brand, and they just love it, and they do not at any point want to give it away for a discounted price. But it's hard, isn't it?
It is hard. I think that's why it's useful kind of using it, more strategically. So again, another example is if you're sending an abandoned cart series, so series of follow-up emails sent to people who add something to cart but don't check out. I see a lot of kind of brands that go straight in with the discount for people that just didn't convert off the bat, but actually we'd recommend sending them that cart reminder straight away, not necessarily including an incentive in the first email, maybe not even in the second, but in the third one you could then consider it, because you've got people then who are clearly have showed intent to purchase, are engaged, but for whatever reason aren't checking out, aren't converting. So it's almost like you've got that choice, as you say, of kind of losing the sale or giving them the sale at a discount. And so that's when I would suggest you put in that offer. So I think use relatively sparingly and in strategic places where it works really well, and it doesn't, as I said, doesn't have to be money or discounts off it. You can try this kind of free shipping value add approach as well.
And everyone's got used to these discounts, so we've all done it. We've all gone online, clicked on some black jeans, whatever it may be, and you're flooded then. Email, here's a discount, social, retargeting ad, 10%. We now have become blind to it. A lot of clients that we run ads for, we see that not working now. It hasn't worked for really 6 to 7 months, because we've just become used to coming off that web page and just being bombarded with, like you said, discounts, free shipping, all the rest of it. Using it strategically, it can work, but actually the days of being able to get an instant sale once someone's left that landing page or that web page or that e-commerce site, it's just not there anymore, because we, like I said, as humans have just become blind to it, because everyone has done it. But what you said earlier about sort of replenishment, especially for some of the health and wellness brands I'm sure you deal with, works really well. We've used an example on this podcast before, which is Nick. He bought a barbecue last summer. And a couple of days later, when it was about to rain, got an email from Amazon saying, I see we haven't bought a cover. Do you want one?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just on the money, just total personalization. He's obviously gone and bought it because he needed one because it was about to rain. So he's like, okay, there you go. That's how it's done properly, in my opinion. That's done. But that's very hard to do, because obviously we're not all Amazon, and obviously they've been able to look at that one set product out of the millions of products they've got on their site. But that's how it can be done brilliantly. But how they've done that is, and this is what I wanted to really go into today a little bit, is that it's all based on psyche, isn't it? It's a psychological side of actually waiting until you can go onto those pressure points and go, well, actually, we can need to email them now for that particular reason.
Yeah, and I think it can be tricky, because if you've got a small team, you're not necessarily having someone sitting there creating all these kind of reactive email campaigns. So I'd always recommend sort of thinking about those key scenarios in your customer journey that could benefit from a trigger that's automated and set up. Like the replenishment one is a really obvious one, in terms of if you're selling something that runs out, like skincare, then it makes sense to have that kind of always on type trigger, that after X amount of time, after someone's bought something, you send them the reminder for the, to buy another one. And there'll be, if you sort of, I would recommend people sort of sit down and look at that customer journey and identify those different spots within that journey to see where those triggers are, and therefore where those, you can start putting in those different automated series to actually do a lot of the hard work for you, so that you don't have to have someone there looking at the weather forecast and thinking, oh god, it's going to rain, let's send an email, because as you say, it's only the Amazons and the bigger companies who have a team dedicated to be able to do those sorts of things. So yeah, recommendation is probably to sort of sit down and look at that, map out that customer journey, all those different touch points, and you'll likely be able to see where those spots are in terms of key trigger points that you can then automate.
How do you map out the customer journey?
That's a good question. So I would generally, when we do this with clients, we generally walk through kind of the end to end. So we'll start with, okay, someone's coming to the website. How are you initially going to capture that email address? Do you have a pop-up on site? You'll likely be capturing their email address when they purchase something, but where are the entry points? So thinking about how is that email address initially getting into your database? Do you have a kind of a newsletter sign up form? Do you have some kind of lead magnet? And then there'll be those different entry points. And then from there, you can think about, okay, well, if they signed up for a 10% discount on a pop-up, we need to then obviously send them the email with the code or whatever it is, and you start having these different avenues from people that are entering the site or entering your database, and you want to then sort of map out those different touch points from that initial starting point. You then get to the point of, okay, that the first goal of capturing that email address is to get someone to make a purchase. So how can you put in a number of different emails and touch points that help build trust, help get them to make that purchase? Once they've made that purchase, what happens? Do we give them a bit of kind of reassurance they've made a great decision? Can we do a kind of a check-in with them? Can we get customer feedback? Can we get them to join a loyalty program? So then you go down that kind of first purchase route, and you got the second, you sort of, the way we do it is generally sort of literally walking through step by step all those different avenues and ways people are coming into your database initially, before kind of making that purchase. And then you might think it's going to be quite sort of business specific, because depending on what you're offering or selling, you'll have different lifetimes of that customer and that sort of thing, so you get quite nuanced quite quickly. But in a nutshell, you'll have that kind of that welcome journey, you have your first purchase journey, you'll have probably an abandoned cart, you're then thinking about kind of the replenishment, the win back, your lapsing customers, loyalty programs sort of sit on top of that. So it takes a bit of time and a bit of headspace, but the easiest way I found to do it is literally to sort of go through with a bit of a kind of fine tooth comb and go through all those different, that initial entry point, and then what happens to those different customers as they interact with the brand. Probably
a lot of the companies even we deal with, I speak to a lot of customers and they don't really know it. They know it to a level, but they get quite blasé with it. I think once someone sort of sniffs a bit of success, they're like, oh, it's fine now, it'll work. Yeah. And especially like I said with those types of email series, they need to be right, because once, like I said, going back to that point about acquiring that customer or bringing someone into your brand, it's not cheap anymore. It's really expensive. Like using social ads that we do, it's still very cheap, but it's not cheap as it was. PPC very expensive. SEO takes time, expensive. Everything costs money. But actually, what's really nice is this email list. And like you said, then, is actually how do we get that email list? Is it a downloadable cheat sheet? Where's that value exchange? And it can be anything, couldn't it? It could be like a birthday. Like Moonpig did it for me last year. They were like, oh, when's your birthday? And actually, when's all your sort of family birthdays? And we'll let you know. And I was like, fair play. That's good. Yeah, brilliant. I can't forget now. So I'm totally done. Mother's Day, don't forget that anymore. So it's about sort of personalization, isn't it? As close as you can, but obviously we're understanding that not every small brand has the resource, which is obviously where, you know, a company of your will come in.
Yeah.
For emails, and if we sort of look at e-commerce brands as an example, we'll know Klaviyo. Is that probably the best email platform out there for e-commerce brands?
Yeah, I have to say I do really rate it and do recommend it. We use it with probably 90% of our clients. We're a Klaviyo Gold partner actually, so I do recommend it. It's really great if you're for that direct consumer e-commerce type business. The integrations are great in terms of kind of connecting with Shopify and similar sort of e-com sites. So and also I think where it's sort of head and shoulders above the rest is the segmentation piece, and is that kind of data analysis side of things. It can be a bit overwhelming trying to dive into all that data, but they make it quite simple in terms of being able to segment and identify different buckets within your customer journey. It also is quite helpful if you're kind of starting from scratch in terms of sort of recommendations around different types of email journeys that you might like to have in place, and templates and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's I recommend it to most of our clients, and particularly on the e-commerce side. It's definitely one to bear in mind.
Are there any others? Because I remember meeting Klaviyo at a business network event. This was probably 7 years ago, when it was just an idea. And at the time they did a bit of a presentation, and Nick and I were there going, they'll do really well, they will. I think they'll do, and obviously now they've the juggernaut they are. But there's none others really, is there? Or was there anyone else you'd recommend? MailChimp, I'm not a fan of MailChimp personally, that's just my opinion. But
I agree, I'm not the biggest fan of MailChimp. There are others. There's the much bigger options like Braze, Pardot, Marketo. There's things like Campaign Monitor. There's a lot of others out there, but I'm probably a bit biased, but I think of all the options, if you're considering starting from scratch, Klaviyo is definitely one to strongly consider, particularly if you're an e-com brand. They make your life quite easy in terms of sort of getting started and that segmentation piece.
For health and wellness brands, email is really important, because those particular sectors using social media has become a lot harder. So we deal with a few brands that do, I can never pronounce the word, but it's basically a form of man boobs. It's like gynomastia or something like that. I can't pronounce it. It's a massive word I couldn't even spell, let alone say. And when you're trying to run ads on Facebook and Instagram and places like TikTok, it's really hard now to get it through their systems. It's very, very hard. So the health and wellness brands that you probably deal with, that some are pill forms or whatever they may be, getting that email address as quick as possible is really important, really important. But have your clients seen any, or have they mentioned to you any issues with sort of using these social platforms now to get their brands out there?
I think we've had a couple of clients which are more kind of down the medical side, and I know that's been a real challenge in terms of what you can and can't say and what you can and can't claim and all that sort of stuff. I think people are having to get more and more creative on that side of things. Also, when you come to kind of the health side of things, you often get there's particularly in the US, there's a compliance thing called HIPAA, HIPAA, I think it is. So, again, around data and making sure you're managing that correctly and capturing it correctly. So there's a few kind of hurdles to jump over there. But we found sort of collecting email addresses through the likes of kind of a quiz, particularly when it's something like to do with health or vitamins, for example, and people don't necessarily know what they need or want. They just have a core concern. Putting them through a quiz or a set of questions, is quite a helpful way of help pointing them towards what products they might like to choose, but also capturing that email address. And you touched on it earlier around kind of that value exchange for maybe some sort of document ebook list, again, is another great way of capturing those emails. But you're right, it is a challenge, particularly in the kind of health wellness space, when there are lots of sort of red tape or bits of red tape you need to get over.
There's a lot. We have a vast amount. Even last week, one of our clients who sound guttering, so I know this is totally off piece.
Yeah.
They closed their account because they sell galvanized steel guttering. One of the AIs saw it and thought it was a gun.
Okay, right.
It looked nothing like a gun, Georgie, I can tell you now. And the worst thing is, these guys do like 100 grand a month on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
They're like, any chance we can get this quick? I said, look, we're trying, but we are just one of a million people that are trying to get stuff sorted. But yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, the health and wellness stuff, some of the brands we deal with are really struggle. But then on the flip side, you've got people like Newman, the erectile dysfunction guys, who are just killing it online on things like Facebook. And how they're doing it, I don't know. But fair play to them; they're doing brilliantly. But some of the stuff is a bit close to the mark. But if you can get it, absolutely.
Yeah, we work with one of their competitors, Hims, and that comes down to how willing they are to play by the rules. And I think sometimes they obviously fly very close to the wind in terms of what you can and can't do, and just to hope that they can get away with it. I don't know. You're right, there are it sort of depends on their appetite to risk, I guess.
If they can get away with it, it's working. Hallelujah, from my perspective. Fair play to them. Just to sort of end, what's your sort of 5 tips for email marketing for e-commerce brands? If you're going to give 5 solid tips for anyone.
Oh, 5. Okay.
5. It can be less. I've used 5, so I thought, Georgie's got tons. She's got hundreds. Probably fine.
Okay, this is straight off the bat. This is no prep for this. Okay, so tip number 1 would be to avoid the blast all approach, and look to segment your audience, and look to put them in different buckets depending on when they last made a purchase, or how much they've engaged with you, whether they're opening or clicking emails, but trying to kind of identify what's important to you and creating those different buckets of customers and then targeting them accordingly. That's tip number 1. I think my second one would be is actually to take some time and map out your customer journey, even if it's very rough, just to kind of work out what's the actual pathway that people are going down. How can we therefore put in place those different touch points that they're automated, that, as you say, once you've kind of got in place, it's a case of not necessarily setting it and forgetting it, but actually just kind of optimizing and tweaking on maybe a sort of monthly basis, rather than having to build campaigns from scratch each time. So mapping out that customer journey is really important. What else? I think the value add piece is something we've chatted about a lot, and is often really overlooked. So it's not, when it comes down to these ongoing comms and building that engagement, it's very much about providing value, not just at the beginning of your interaction with them, but on an ongoing basis. And what other complementary type content can you share with your audience that isn't just content for content's sake, but is actually adding value and interacting with those people. What am I at? 3. Okay, number 4.
2 more.
Number 4 is, so again, something that often gets overlooked is actually asking your customers for extra data about themselves or extra feedback. And you've got that email address. What else can you get them to tell you? Can you ask them for their birthdays? Can you ask them for their preferences on what they like receiving from you, so that you can continually optimize and tailor their comms? You touched on the on running thing earlier, and I think you don't have to ask all the information up front, and probably wouldn't recommend you do, because people won't give it to you. But over time, asking your most engaged people to give you a little bit more information about themselves, so you can help tailor those comms, is a really good idea. So you can start building up that really clear picture of who they are. And number 5, I'm thinking about this one on the spot. Number 5 is I think it's another one we see, maybe a pitfall we see people fall down, is actually asking too much in each email. Kind of rule of thumb is always have one clear call to action per piece of content, per email, per SMS, whatever it is. People often fall down the trap of asking people to do 4 or 5 different things per email, and actually what happens is people just get sort of fatigued and don't do anything. You know, really aim to have one clear message, one clear thing you want someone to do per email that you're sending, in order to really kind of drive that conversion and get people to actually take that decision or take that next step. That's it. I'm done. 5.
Just one more. I have got a question actually.
Yeah.
This is just off the bat.
Yeah.
Plain text or HTML?
Well, okay, so that's a good question. It depends on the purpose of the email. Plain text works really well when it's like maybe a last minute reminder for something, if it's a like a customer service type message, if it's like really, you know, you really need to get hold of someone and it's a last chance. Like it's quite jarring seeing a plain text type message, and people often will respond to them, and obviously it looks very personal. More generally, I would usually prefer to go down the kind of the HTML, more polished design route. But yeah, it has to be really good design. So you need to have that kind of one clear call to action. It needs to be quite image and design led and be very much on brand. So I think use sparingly. The plain text emails work really well. When you really need a response from someone, or you really want to kind of make sure a message gets through. But on the whole, the kind of more brand led HTML route is always a good one to go down.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think for, you know, especially for e-commerce brands, HTML has to be within their arsenal. But plain text do work for certain aspects. And like you said, if you want a quick response, or, you know, like an email from the CEO or the founder about, hey, XYZ, and here's a special discount, then it's seen in a different light. Whereas I think, like, you know, like I said about the strategic discounts earlier, actually having it through an HTML just doesn't seem to resonate as much sometimes on the plain text. But yeah, I think definitely both. But where can, Georgie, thank you for coming on today. I know we've had no prep for this, and that's totally my fault because I've been busy. So I have put you off guard with the 5. But where can people find out more about you? And yeah, obviously I'd like I said, so many people on listen to this, the small e-commerce brands. Email marketing is something that they should do, or they should be doing if they listen to this enough. But where can they find out more about what you guys do and yourself?
Yeah, great. So websites, peppedup.co.uk, so PEPPEDUP.co.uk, or email me directly. Anyone got any questions, want to touch base, want to have a virtual coffee, I'm very up for that. So my email is georgie@peppedup.co.uk, so definitely get in touch.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today, Georgie. Hope you enjoyed it. And next time we will be more prepped, I promise.
Yeah, thanks. Perfect. No, it's been great. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Cheers, Georgie.